2 weeks later, and Celia was completely settled into what someone looking in might call a routine, and what everyone else would call hard work. She had taken over the role of costume assistant as well, after the man quit, refusing to work for the head of costumes for another minute. Celia suspected that there was a romantic affair behind that, but once Rafe had discovered that she could sew, fixing a minute tear to Bobby's opening costume before one of the rehearsals, she was given that job, as well as others. She had memorized the script for Something Forgotten due to the fact that not all of the cast members were present, or even on time. The male counterpart to Bobby's character, Celia, had yet to show up. From what Celia understood, it was because he actually held another job in the real world. And since he was meant to be producing the show as well as starring in it, he could show up whenever he liked, according to the others. It did mean that Celia often filled in, playing Anselm and doing his blocking as a reference for the other characters. She also filled in as Mrs. Squires, Jenny, Roland, and Mr. Pearson, as Alice, the barely adult Penny, the 1930s imitator Mark, and the stately Walt were late, ill, or just absent. Bobby, for all her faults, was at least on time most days. It helped that Celia dragged her out of bed. Adding on costumes to her responsibilities meant that she was running around just about every second of the day. Bobby kept her on her toes, and the head of costume, Tony, snagged every spare minute otherwise. Between fetching coffees and organic foods, cleaning up trashed bathrooms and putting away Bobby's clothes, making sure that the actress arrived at the theater on time, pinning and making adjustments on the costumes, and, in the case of the dress that Bobby was to wear in the final act, helping Tony make it completely from scratch, was enough to ensure that she fell into bed at the end of the day, completely exhausted. "Graham!" Bobby yelled, her voice carrying across the hallway that the theater company had reserved entirely for them. Apparently it was too much trouble to have to run up and down stairs at the hotel. "Graham, where are you?" "Right here," Celia said, poking her head out from the bathroom door. She had been going through the makeup collection and was writing a list of what needed to be purchased. Her bobbed hair was sticking up at odd angles, and the pocket watch necklace she wore swung on its chain. She wore grey-patched skinny jeans and a tunic-length shirt of heath green, and despite the annoyed snarl in Bobby's words and the fact that she had been running around since dawn that morning, she was still smiling. "What do you need?" "I have to get these dresses dry cleaned," Bobby said. 3 of them were parts of costumes, and the other 2 were just everyday dresses. Well, if every day were an event. "I need the costumes for tomorrow." "Okay, sure," Celia said, already tucking the list she had been making into a pocket. She picked up the load of dresses in one arm and started to leave. "Graham, bring back iced tea and a croissant, okay?" Bobby said. "I skipped lunch, and I want something in me before rehearsal tonight. I hear we're going to be working through dinner." "Rafe must really want us to practice," Celia said, moving for the door again. "We don't open for another 3 weeks." She didn't expect Bobby to answer, and didn't blink when Bobby just closed the door behind her. She did blink when Alice saw her leaving with dry cleaning and tossed another set of clothes onto the pile, as did Walt and Penny. Almost completely blind, Celia moved towards the stairs, feeling her way down with her feet as she tried to peer around the pile in her arms. She halted when a voice called out to her, certain that if she moved, she was going to drop something. Pardon, mademoiselle, pouvez-vous m'aider? Je cherchais à la campagne de théâtre, he said. Celia grumbled quietly. Of course, the one problem she had discovered since coming to France, apart from Bobby demanding every ounce of her attention, was that she didn't actually speak French. Celia broke out the only French she knew. Je ne parle pas français. "Ah," came the reply, whose owner she would very much like to see. He had a rich, deep timbre and an almost musical tone, and, if she wasn't mistaken, there was a bit of an "Sprechen Sie Deutsch?" English accent. Never mind, Celia thought. "Yeah," she said, glad that the man spoke at least one language she knew. Her 2 years of university weren't useless after all. "Wie kann ich Ihnen helfen?" "Oh, bother," she said, getting jostled by someone coming down the stairs from behind. The person, a tourist perhaps, moved past Celia and the stranger, muttering apologies. "You're English?" the man asked once the other person had gone, in a perfect posh English accent, one that she knew well. Celia desperately tried to peer around her pile of clothes and decided that she would just have to get scolded later for setting precious costumes down on the stairs where anyone could come on them. She put them down and stared straight into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. The owner had wavy, combed brown hair, cut in a classic style that could have belonged to the 1800s, 1940s, or modern day. He had the typical pale skin of the English and the physique of a footballer, Celia's weakness. He wore plain trousers and a grey button-up shirt, a bag in one hand. He was obviously moneyed, and Celia felt wholly inadequate with her patched jeans and tousled hair. "English, yes," she said before she could be called out for staring. "I thought you were, German," the man said, brushing his hair back in an embarrassed gesture. "You're in Monte Carlo, and you immediately assume that if I don't speak French, I must be German?" Celia asked, raising her eyebrows. "Yes, of course. Now that you say it, English was the natural next language," the man smiled sheepishly. Celia nodded and waited a beat to see if he was going to actually ask her a question or just stand there. "Oh, right. You wouldn't happen to know where the manager of the theatre company Wordplay is? I was told that the company is on the 3rd floor and, well, sure," Celia said with a casual shrug. "You want the room at the end of the hall. If he isn't there, he'll be in 304 with the stage manager." She started to turn and point in the way, and then got her foot caught in one of Walt's shirts. Right. Dry cleaning. Celia gathered the laundry up in her arms and started down the stairs as if she hadn't been interrupted. "Thanks," the man said. "I'm Grayson North." "So you're meant to be playing Anselm," Celia said. It made sense. He was the sort of undeniably handsome that fit with the star of a play. Yes?" Grayson said with another embarrassed sweep of his palm across his hair. Celia nodded and smiled over her shoulder at him as she went down the stairs. "That's good," she said. "Now I can stop playing you." There. That should be cryptic enough to completely make a fool of herself, she decided, glad to have the armful of laundry to bury her blushing face into. Celia darted down the stairs with a quick step, hoping that Grayson would just completely forget that she had said something like that in all of the hullabaloo that was surely to follow his arrival. The arrival of the main character and the money. Celia forced herself to stop thinking about it as she walked through the lobby of the hotel and nodded to the bellhop that waited for something interesting to happen. He nodded back to her and held the door, having grown used to the plucky assistant. She murmured a thanks in broken French and walked out onto the streets of Monte Carlo. The people with money glared at Celia as she walked past with her armful of clothes, but the store owners and the people who were tourists just smiled and laughed, either familiar with her antics or amused by the sight of someone walking to the dry cleaners. Having made the trip a few times before, Celia ducked down the 3rd alleyway from the hotel with ease, finding herself at the cleaners a few minutes later. The owner gave a full-belly laugh as she came inside. "Bonjour, bonjour," he said. Celia deposited the pile on his counter, and they set to talking in what amounted to broken phrases in French, English, and occasionally some sort of sign language, when everything else failed. Eventually, they figured each other out, and Celia got a ticket for the pile of clothes to be picked up the next day. "Merci," Celia called, ran out of the cleaners, jogging back to the hotel, and not forgetting to pick up the iced tea and croissant on the way. She made it back to the hotel in time to find Rafe leaving, grumbling into his phone. "Oh, there you are, Celia," Rafe said, hanging up his phone and making Celia wonder why she hadn't heard hers ringing if he was calling her. "I wanted you to know that our patron and Anselm have arrived. No more filling in for him, so you can focus all your time on Bobby and the costumes." "Just dropped a few off at the cleaners," Celia said. "What's the schedule for tonight?" "Keep Bobby from going out if at all possible. I want us at the theatre by 5 and we'll stay there until I say," Rafe said. Celia grimaced. Another long night, if that was any indication. I know. But we have 3 weeks until we open and none of our actors have rehearsed with the actual Anselm. Not to mention that we have tech rehearsal and dress rehearsal and any of the problems that are bound to happen on the way. No, how could you even say such a thing? Young Penny was stalking through the lobby, her blonde hair whirling about her as though she were walking through wind. Her eyes were blazing and heels clicking on the tile floor of the lobby. Alice, ever calm and ready with the distracting words in case things were getting too heated between anyone, was following after her, her mouth drawn in an angry line. "Because I know Walt, and I know he likes his women," Alice said, "no matter that we've been married for 20 years. Don't you dare deny this." "You've been divorced twice," Penny whirled and jabbed her finger at Alice, snarling. "And are right in the middle of another separation. So what if you want something that you can't give him any more? It's not a crime to be young and beautiful." "But sleeping with my husband is certainly enough to bring down a whole load of crap on your head, slut," Alice said. Celia raised her eyebrows. In the 2 weeks she had known Penny and Alice, she had never heard the older woman say more than a drat when spilling her coffee one morning. Just goes to show, Celia thought, that actors were always more volatile than they appeared. Rafe looked at Celia desperately, and she shook her head, holding up the tea and bag with a croissant, mouthing, "Bobby." She did not want to be dragged into the middle of that argument, and there was no way that Rafe was going to rope her in, not when she had such a solid excuse. Celia dashed for the stairs before the manager could come up with a decent reply and took the stairs at a run. 3 flights later, and she leaned against the wall, breathing heavily and grinning like a fox. Narrow escapes were the most entertaining. She took the time to regain her breath and waltzed into Bobby's room, opening the door with her spare key. "Brought your croissant," Celia called, closing the door with her hip. She moved into the room and stopped in mild surprise. There was Grayson North, standing with hands in pockets and an intriguing expression on his face. Bobby was sitting in one of the armchairs, hand out as though she were in the middle of asking him to sit down. "Graham, there you are," Bobby said. Celia lifted her eyes, silently grateful that she had coveted the bear claw in the coffee shop. It would never do to serve Bobby and not a guest. She would just have to get a pastry later. "I was just meeting our newest member of the troupe. Meet Mr. Grayson North." Was it Celia's imagination, or was Bobby actually being charming? No, there was a pleasant and even demure smile, and a breezy note in her voice. We've met, Grayson said, on the stairs. Only you had a bundle of laundry and I thought you were a German. Graham? Bobby asked. Celia shrugged and opened the paper bag, depositing the croissant and bear claw on a tea tray. She didn't have another iced tea, but she could always fill up the electric kettle. Unusual name, Grayson commented, accepting Bobby's silent invitation to sit down. Oh, right, sorry, Celia said, holding out her hand to shake. I'm Celia Graham, Bobby's assistant and general lackey for the production. If you need something, just ask for Graham. It's easier than Celia, what with the main character being named Celia. Makes sense. People call me North. Grayson shook her hand firmly, hand surprisingly calloused for someone who supposedly came from a great deal of money. So, Graham, did you just guess that Miss Thurston was going to have a guest, or are you in the habit of bringing extra pastries? Sheer luck and a good deal of magic, Celia answered. Bobby blinked, a warning. Celia got the picture perfectly well and managed to keep the easy smile on her face while feeling the stab of hurt inside. The beautiful actress had a much better chance with a handsome producer. Not the assistant who floated from job to job, living on the pound and running away at everyone else's beck and call. Rehearsal is from 5 until Rafe decides that we're done. I'd eat something now because who knows whether he'll even want to stop for supper, Celia said, backing away, fading into the background as she had done so often before. Thank you, Graham, Bobby said with a possibly genuine smile. Grayson North didn't even bother to respond as Bobby immediately launched into a question-and-answer session about his work and what his vision for the play was. Celia ducked into the bathroom and went back to inventorying Bobby's makeup. Half an hour later, and her golly mopes, as she called them, had very nearly faded away. What she needed was some time off, Celia decided. If Rafe agreed and she could convince Bobby that having Celia around tomorrow would be a hindrance, she would go explore Monte Carlo, alone, and perfectly fine with that, thank you.